Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Veil and the Thread podcast. We are mother and daughter team. I'm Sarah, the daughter.
And I'm Elizabeth, the mother.
Okay, so on the last episode, we were talking about empaths, what empaths are and what it means to be an empath. And for me, not that there's any necessarily any linear structure in low to high within the mediumship arena, I do always kind of consider that the empath is kind of like stage one of that scale, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like
Mm.
the beginning of the journey of you're experiencing energy that is not necessarily your own. And so for me, the empath is kind of the the gateway into, spiritualism and things that are otherworldly. So then I guess in my mind, the next step is psychic, and we're also introducing the concept of mediumship. Now, we both have very different vocabulary where this stuff is concerned, so we'll try and work through that as we discuss it.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I talk psychic versus mediumship, I'm talking psychic picking up something from somebody's aura, somebody's energy that is on the living plane. When I'm talking about mediumship, I'm kind of talking about communicating with energies that are no longer on the same plane as us, so people that have passed. But I know that your vocabulary may differ slightly. So how do you see the psychic versus mediumship?
Okay. Well, before I give you my opinion of that, just going back to the last podcast when we talked about empaths, and I think we agreed, didn't we, that not all empaths become mediums, not all mediums are empaths.
Hmm.
But at the end of it, I did make the comment that everybody's a medium.
Mm. Yes, you did.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll see if I can try and clarify that now. So to me, psychic mediumship, and it is just about vocabulary because a lot of mediums will just say it's just all mediumship, but a lot will say, well, the psychic mediumship, which is more, about reading people's auras, their energies,
Mm.
being able to tune in to the here and now, the past, and even what's to come
Hmm.
for that person, like reading their aura. Um, and that is solely with the living being, if you like, rather than a
Mm.
disembodied being.
Yeah.
And that spiritual mediumship would be more about communicating with disembodied spirits who, are on the other side. But then the word medium to me just means somebody who is like, I suppose, a go between. You know,
Mm.
you're you're there between different energies and
So yeah,
deciphering
so
those different energies.
so then I guess where the difference comes for me and you is that yeah, I would consider the word medium to be a medium between our energy and the energy of another realm, the people
Yeah,
that have passed. Whereas you're considering a medium to be between energies that could all be on this plane as well.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
a medium between your energy and somebody else's energy of another living person.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm talking strictly about how I see psychic mediumship,
Yeah.
and this nothing is ever straightforward, I don't think, either because, for example, if you are communicating, if you are picking up information from someone who's living,
Hmm.
then is it possible to pick up something from that person's aura from somebody who is disembodied
Mm,
via their reading their auras, reading their
okay.
energies?
Okay, so that's I think that's an interesting concept to come back to. So let's wind it back a little bit then, um, just for people that might kind of be new to all of this terminology and or coming from it from a different perspective to what we're both coming from it. So let's get down to basics then. We've kind of briefly mentioned psychic versus communicating with energies that are no longer on the living plane. So people might be a little bit confused when they go see a medium or they go see a psychic or they go see somebody that considers themselves to be a psychic medium, as you've said. Is this basically what we're talking about? Is that basically the definition that you would give, that when we're working psychically, we're working with energies that we can pick up from people and objects around us, as opposed to tapping into energies that are no longer with us? Is that how you would
Yeah, yeah. I think,
define it?
as I said, the edges are blurred, but I do, yeah, I think that. And I think the one of the obvious distinctions is if somebody goes for a psychic reading, then they're more than likely going to get information about their lives here on planet Earth. You
Hmm.
know how those things around them affect them in this
Yeah.
life and how they're going to live this life. But some people, particularly if you've lost someone you love, they don't want a psychic reading. They don't want to know whether, they're going to move house or get that
Hmm.
job they've applied for and blah, blah, blah. They want to be able to communicate with a person who's passed on and to know that they still exist. So then they would seek out more someone who refers to themselves as a spiritual medium.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some mediums talk about really not wanting to do so much psychic work. They want to do the spiritual mediumship, but in reality, because the edges are blurred, you're going to naturally go from one to the other for the most part. If
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? You're going to be going through the different vibrations.
Yeah, which I mean, this topic is potentially huge because it kind of there's all of these little branch off kind of questions and things that are coming to mind just as you're speaking about this. And one of them first of all that I'll speak about is that idea that the energy that you pick up from an individual might not just be contained to the energy of that person. So there's um
Exactly.
there's a remote viewer that I sometimes watch, and I know that
Mhm.
you've watched her stuff as well, Elizabeth April.
Uh-huh.
In one of her recent videos, she was talking about, well, she was actually talking about tapping into the the conscious energy to, maybe receive downloads on things that you want
Mhm.
to learn or things you want to experience. And she was talking about how she couldn't sleep one night and she wanted to get this energy of sleepiness. So she tried to tap into the energy of her partner who was fast asleep. And she's describing how she pulls on this energy, she gets this wave of exhaustion, fantastic, it's starting to work, she's starting to feel tired.
Mm.
Um, but one of the other things that she brought into that was how she'd started to have memories of a conversation with her partner's mother that day. And she was like, I didn't have a conversation with my partner's mother, but obviously her partner had. And so she was picking up the energy and the memories of the conversation that her partner had had with her mother. So obviously the energy is her partner's because she's been through that experience, but that's a kind of a way of showing how that energy can extend beyond that one person, because if that one person has had linked experiences with a number of different people that week, are you then able to kind of hack into their energy or their experiences, from that linked connection, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would even say, just as I was saying a few minutes ago, well, I was posing it as a question. Do you think that if we can do all this on a psychic level, or whatever level you want to call it,
Hmm.
then is it also possible to tune in to the, um, to say, a deceased relative of that
Hmm.
person you're communicating with on a psychic link, thousands of miles away, but communicate, also be able to pick up the fact that they have a dead relative with them?
Yeah, yeah. So then I guess the interesting thing about this then is i- if I mean, you said earlier, everybody's a medium. I think we would both agree that the ability of communicating with energies that have passed is based on a lot of things. You yourself being open, or practicing regularly, because it's something that
Mm,
you
mm,
have to practice regularly, to not only for picking up energy psychically, but connecting with spirit on the other side. And so if I was somebody that said, "Oh, I seem to be really good at psychic energy, but I don't seem to have a very strong connection with spirit on the other side," then that would probably alter the information that I'm picking up from that person. So, in your example of somebody that's 1,000 miles away, I might be able to pick up from their energy that they have a relative that has passed, and I might even be able to pick up energy of that past relative through the memories that that person is holding within their own
yeah,
aura.
yeah, yeah.
But if I don't consider myself to have a strong connection with the afterlife, then I'm obviously not going to be able to pick up any information from that past relative that the living relative didn't know. Does does that make
Well,
sense? And do
it
you
does
agree?
make sense.
Or
Well, it does make sense, except just because you don't believe that you're a medium who can pick up energies from spirit, the
Mhm.
spirit world, doesn't mean it's not happening. You just don't believe it's happening.
Yeah, yeah. But then but but then that but it is, I'm sure you would agree that it's something that you have to work at. Like we've had these conversations before, right, where i I use oracle cards, I use tarot cards. I'm quite comfortable in that world, because I consider the information that I'm getting to be on a psychic level. I do
Mm-hmm.
consider
Mm.
that I've got a strong ability to tap in on a psychic level. But then when I'm maybe in a development circle and I'm attempting to communicate with somebody that I didn't know, and it's just out of the blue, I'm not connecting with you and trying to pick up one of your relatives. It's the other way around. I'm trying to connect with spirit and then trying to decipher who that message is for. That's much more difficult for me to do.
Yeah. And I think, in all honesty, if people, if mediums really thought about it, they would acknowledge that it's also very hard for them. For example, right, what I like to do, if someone's going to come to me for a reading, I don't know them. All I have is
Hmm.
the name. And I like to sit before they come. And I like to ask the spirit world, can you give me something as evidence of your existence that I couldn't, just naturally pick up from them if they were sat here? So
Hmm.
they could give me a lot of information, you know, about their
Mm.
personality, how they looked, the whole lot.
Yeah.
And I could have a full page of information before that person arrives. Now,
Hmm.
the question has always been for me, how can I truly say that this is all from spirit? Because this arrived before the person arrived in my home.
Okay.
So do I take it that that's all spirit, or on an energetic level, we're all energy? Am I picking up from them on a psychic link before they've even walked through my door?
So that, yeah, and so that was going to be my next question, because for me, I believe that as soon as you've made that energetic link with somebody, which could be as simple as them reaching out to you and saying, "I'd like a reading,"
Yeah,
you've then created an energetic bridge between the two of you, which in I guess when you look at the laws of spirituality and the laws of the universe, that's that person giving you permission to tap into their energy because they're coming to you for a reading, right?
yeah,
And so you then have this psychic link. So do I know what other mediums have said to me in the past about how they try to decipher what they're picking up psychically or what they're picking up spiritually, which in the great scheme of things, like you said, does it really matter? Do you have a way of deciphering, I picked this up psychically or I picked this up from spirit?
yeah. To be honest with you, the only time when I can 100% be
Hmm.
certain that I have picked up something from the spirit world is when I've had a profound dream
Hmm.
about somebody I know nothing about, never met them, um, and then I'm able to, word for word, say what that person in my dream state told me,
Yeah.
to tell someone when I come across them. Um, I mean, I won't bore you with the details, but I will say that I've only ever once had absolute proof that a spirit child came to me and gave me information to pass on to his mother. The child had been killed at the age of 5, and I
Mm.
didn't know anything about that family other
Hmm.
than somebody phoned me one day and said, this terrible thing has happened. This little boy's been killed in a road accident, and is there anything you can pick up that I can pass on to the family? And I just went to bed that night and said, if there's anything I can say or do, please allow that to happen. And the next morning, the child was in the bedroom and he was communicating with me. And the information that I was able to then pass on to the family via a third
Hmm.
person was absolutely correct for that family.
Yeah.
So I just knew in my heart.
Sorry, just to clarify, so you said you'd had communication from this little boy. Was that actually in your dream, or you've woken up in the morning and then
Yeah,
you,
in yeah. I woke up. The first thing I became aware of was a child stood in the bedroom,
Mhm.
and
And
then
is that somebody you could physically see, or was it more you saw him in your mind's eye?
it was like I suppose you would say a third eye, or you know,
Hmm.
um, yeah, clairsentience,
Yeah.
clairsentience. So I could feel, but I
Hmm.
could describe what he looked like, what he was wearing, all the
Yeah.
colours, right down to the smallest detail. And then, so that was an awake moment for me. But other than that, they've tended to come in dream form,
Mm.
where the next morning I've actually questioned myself: was that real, or
Yeah.
was it a dream? And then being able to substantiate it later that it was spirit coming through, and that's one of the best ways for them to come through.
Mm.
Absolutely, one of the best ways, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but I was always told by my teacher, to prove that you're connecting with spirit, you should be able to tell somebody something from their past, something from their present, and something from their future.
Mhm.
But since that time, I've actually questioned that philosophy or that
W-
description.
Well, I guess when you say, I mean, you can say what you think, but without getting any input from you, the first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is that not something you can pick up from somebody's aura?
This is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now,
And so, yeah, so then this is where the lines get blurred, right? Because
very.
I guess it depends as well on what kind of information you believe your aura holds, because I think people forget that, well, maybe not forget, maybe just have a different opinion. But for me, the energy that you hold within your aura is the past, it's the present, but and this is kind of opening this up to a much bigger topic because everything does, doesn't it, in this world?
Uh-huh.
Is your aura actually tapped in to the Akashic field, which then contains everything? It contains the
Yeah,
past, the present, and the future. So really, can I pick up that future information from your aura anywhere, which would be on a psychic level as opposed to hearing it from spirit?
exactly. And let's get really complicated. If you think the past, the present, and the future is all happening at the same time, which we're
Yeah.
told it is,
Oh,
are
yeah.
we
Yeah.
are we connecting with somebody's higher self?
Yeah, exactly. Which, like I said, it's a massive subject, and hopefully over the weeks we'll kind of tap into each of these things. But I'll tell you what I've been told by working mediums as well, that for them, they know that they're working with spirit if they can actually sense, and this leads on to what we'll talk about next, the different clairs. So whether they can sense with one of the clairs, whether it be clairsentience, clairvoyance, that they're communicating with a spirit person. So their opinion being that if they have this information that they just know, then
Mm,
they assume that they're working on a psychic level. Whereas if they have information that they can actually link to somebody in spirit giving to them, then they're working on a spiritual level. But then
yeah,
that in itself has a lot of grey areas, right?
yeah,
Because if a thought pops into my head, something about you that I just know, have I picked that up psychically, or a spirit put that into my head?
yeah, exactly. But what about mediums who would say that they are clairvoyant, so that they
Mhm.
do actually see spirit, and they can describe that person? I, I don't meet too many mediums that say that they actually do see outside of their own.
Okay, then. Well,
Um,
stop there then, because
yeah.
before you carry on with that thought, let's move into the conversation about the different clairs. So, if you just want to give people like a very brief overview of the clairs, like there's quite a few clairs, isn't there? But there's the more
Yeah.
common ones. So, just kind of give a very brief overview of the ones that we're going to talk about today, and then we'll go into that in more depth.
Yeah, well, I suppose the more common ones are like, clairvoyance that was said about clear seeing, where people will see the spirit image.
And
Um,
so Claire basically means clear, right? It's like Latin for clear, I think.
yes,
So
yeah,
so
yeah,
clairvoyance is, you said clear seeing?
clear seeing, yeah.
Okay.
So, and depending on who you talk to, some mediums would say that, well, that would be seeing the person, seeing the disembodied person as they were.
Okay, and we'll talk about that in more depth in a second because that's an interesting subject in itself. What's the next Claire?
All right. So, well, clairaudience, which is hearing,
So clear hearing.
so yeah, so clear hearing. Clairsentience, which I think we both are, that's
Mm-hmm.
about feeling, which is,
Okay.
I think, one of the hardest to describe to somebody when you say, I sense, but then you can describe what somebody looks like and wears, but you would describe
Yeah.
yourself as clairsentient,
And I guess linking into
sensing emotions.
what we spoke about last time as well, I think that and I've spoken to a lot of mediums that have said that empaths that then go into spiritual mediumship, that's quite often the first clair that they develop, or it's quite often their strongest clair, because as an empath,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
used to feeling emotions and
yeah,
feeling things, and so clairsentient
yeah,
is kind of the natural development for empaths.
yeah. And there's claircognizance, which I don't think people talk too much about, but it's a knowing. You just
Mm,
know.
yeah,
And there may not be any emotion to it, it's just a logical knowing.
yeah.
And, and then, of course, there's all sorts of other areas like the automatic writing and psychometry, where you pick up.
Y-
Go
Yeah.
on, go on.
We do, well, no, sorry, I was going to say there's a lot of different offshoots, like you said, automatic writing, channeling, trance, and I think that'd be a really good subject in and of itself for another podcast. But I was going to say one of the clairs, and you might have it to hand, you might know it, and it's very, very rarely spoken about, but it's the clair where is this all the same one, or is it different ones where you've got the smelling and the taste?
Yeah, there's two. Yeah, I never get this right. Claire, oh, it's for the word for smell. I just,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
mean, as I say, it's something that's very rarely spoken about, and I think in itself, it's probably one of the less common
but
things that
it's one of
mediums
the most powerful.
experience.
They
Yeah,
the smelling is one of the most powerful forms of mediumship for me, because we know that smell is very, very attached to memory.
okay.
So, if you could be a medium who that's all you do. Your skill is that you can identify smells and even be able to tell the person what what you're smelling, what kind of flower, what
I'm
kind of
just gonna
perfume.
I'm just going to interject because I just I don't actually remember this word. Maybe I heard a different one, but it's saying for the sense of smell, it's clairaudience or clairolfaction, and
That's
then
it.
for
Yeah,
tasting, it's clairgustance.
that's it. I was thinking of
Yeah,
the Claire Gustons. Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
So I think they are two that are often incorporated in and amongst other, uh, skills that somebody has, other clairs that they have. But you'll get
yeah.
mediums who only ever get smells. And I think that is amazing, because you think how powerful, if you smell something from your past or from, the
Yeah.
memory of something, it is so powerful.
It is,
And
and actually, when I was saying that it's one of the less common ones, as I'm thinking about it, actually, how many times have you heard people who are not mediums, not necessarily in that world at all,
mm,
but they'll say, oh, since so and so passed, every time I walk into the house, I can smell cigarette smoke, or I can
uh-huh,
smell their perfume, or I can smell, whatever that is linked to that person. So I'm saying it's a less commonly experienced sense, but actually it probably isn't, right? Maybe that's one of the easiest ways that spirit can communicate with us.
absolutely. And you don't need a medium to connect you with that, do you?
No,
If you walk into a room and you smell cigarettes, you immediately know who it belongs to.
exactly.
And like you say, it's very common, particularly in the days and weeks after somebody's passed, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
And
and I think the Claire Gustance is probably a little less common where you get the taste
yeah,
for something. Um,
yeah,
I have occasionally seen mediums on the platform say, "Oh, I've got a taste of this or that," but it's not one that you hear about maybe as
no,
much as the others.
No, that's true, which is interesting, really, because I suppose, like a lot of other things, those senses, um, they're not seen as anything brilliant, but when
Mm.
you're able to give somebody a message about a smell that triggers a fantastic memory for them, then it's
Yeah,
everything. You know,
yeah, yeah,
in that just one sentence, you could just tell them everything they want to know.
yeah. Exactly. Well, yeah, as you said, the memory of a smell or a taste is so
Mm,
ingrained, isn't it, and so profound that it speaks a thousand words, really. You know,
yeah,
it can take you back to a particular moment in life. Um,
yeah.
and we kind of, sorry, did you wanted to say something else about
Well,
that?
I just wanted to throw a curveball, really. See what you
Mm,
think of this. Okay. Um, you know that in Hinduism and in Buddhism, that God, there are people within those faiths that might believe in God,
mm,
but many Hindus have said to me and Buddhists that they don't believe in a God as such.
okay.
They believe that, eventually the plan is to return to the void, to
Hmm.
where all life came from. It's nothing and everything at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, someone once said to me, can you be an atheist and be a medium? And I said,
Mm,
yeah, absolutely, you can.
hmm.
Absolutely. And so that triggered off a whole conversation. And I just wondered what I'm throwing that at you now, just without a chance to think about it. But
Yeah. That, well, yeah, it's an interesting perspective, I guess. Um, It's a difficult one for me to answer because I've always had a belief in something bigger, of a higher power, whether I
yeah,
label that as God or whatever. I've always believed that there's been a higher intelligence to everything. And I don't even know that I've necessarily decided whether that higher intelligence existed as a higher intelligence in first and foremost, or whether it was a higher intelligence that was created organically through the process of life and energy developing.
yeah,
Um, though yeah, I've always just been of the assumption that there's something higher, and that makes it easy then for me to see the universe in energy and, energy not being destroyed and it passing on to somewhere else, which makes it easy for me to believe in reincarnation and spirit and other realms. Um, as an atheist, if I didn't have a belief in something bigger, could I still have the belief that the universe is made up of a whole load of different frequencies and energies? I guess I could. I
yeah,
guess I guess the belief would just be that it was happening in and of itself organically rather than it being part of a higher choreographed thing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, imagine, just visualize this. For example, and a lot of people, people of faith even, uh, bel well, believe that when you die, you lay in the ground until the day of judgment. You're asleep.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you have people who are atheists who will
Hmm.
say there is no God, and when you die, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, those two groups of people are not exempt from being able to do psychic mediumship, is my argument,
Okay.
because after everything we've talked about, we're agreeing that you can communicate with people thousands of miles away. You
Hmm.
can pick up information from their aura. You can sit in a room and give somebody a psychic reading.
Hmm.
That does not depend on the belief that when you die, there is a spirit world to which you will travel.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's parts in that I would really have to sit and think about, because there's parts that I think, well, if you don't believe in this, how can you do this and blah blah blah. But it does answer a question for me that quite often, if I go to a service, a spiritual service, I've heard mediums say, "Oh, if you believe in the afterlife," or, "I assume that most people in the room believe in the afterlife or reincarnation." And I sit there and I think, how can you be in this world and not believe in that? You know what I mean? But obviously, I don't I don't know for certain until I pass. I don't know what the actual structure and the actual truth is. And actually, well, this is going down a path that we're not going to go down, because again, it's another huge thing. But my truth is could be different to somebody else's truth, and they both be right. Those
Yeah,
people that don't believe in reincarnation or spirit, then when they pass, then maybe that's just not part of their creation the
yeah,
way that it is for mine. And so, but that, yeah, we're going to have to find an atheist who believes in psychic mediumship to
but
come
then,
on and do an
yeah,
interview with us, so we
yeah,
can pick their brains
yeah.
about all of that.
There must be
Yeah.
somebody out there. And you know
Oh,
what else?
definitely.
And something I want to get this in because I just think, and you living in Canada, you will totally agree. Something that we don't tend to cover is shamanic mediumship, which
Mm.
I don't profess to know a lot about
Hmm.
because, it's culturally different
Yeah.
to Western ideology about mediumship. But I wanted to mention it because you and I have talked a lot about family constellation,
Yeah.
which we can get into at another time. But the whole idea of ancestral trauma
Hmm.
traveling traveling through generations,
Yeah.
if you believe in reincarnation,
Yeah.
possibly. So, but I read something the other day about shamanic mediumship and how thousands of years ago, when they were practicing shamanism, they could recognize trauma, people suffering from trauma. And
Mm.
they believe that when you suffer from extreme trauma, your soul becomes fragmented.
Yes. Yeah.
And what the shaman will then do, they will put themselves into trance,
Mm.
and they will travel to the other world, and they will bring back your fragmented soul and reunite the living person with
Well, yeah.
their
And
soul.
that's something that's moved beyond those shamanic and indigenous cultures now, right? I mean, I've been through ceremonies of soul retrieval.
Yeah,
That's what they call it, soul retrieval, where you're going back into previous incarnations and as you say, going to events that have been so traumatic that a part of you has stayed trapped there.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, that's
yeah. I
again
just
another
wanted to,
massive subject.
yeah, I wanted to get that in for two reasons, really. Because when it comes to indigenous people and their belief systems, and
Hmm.
they were just so way, way ahead of
Yeah,
us,
yeah.
particularly in the Western world. And even picking up the thread of, are you an atheist and
Mm,
don't believe in life after death or reincarnation? You could actually say, from a biological perspective, all the trauma that your ancestors went through sits in your DNA, but not, it's not something that you can, how can I put it? It sits there because it's biological, and it has
hmm.
nothing to do with spirit and reincarnation or anything else. It's just a
Oh, yeah.
biological
Well,
product.
I mean, we would obviously have to look into this in a lot more depth, but I I would say that there's probably an argument now within the scientific arena of being able to look at people's DNA, people's genes, the freak. I guess it would still be a little bit more, on the outer skirts of mainstream science, but looking at how people's DNA and genes hold a different frequency pattern, based on what trauma they
Yeah,
have been through or their family has been through along the lines. But I mean, yeah, we've done an offshoot in so many different areas there that I can see being extremely interesting subjects to pick up. But what I do want to kind of pull back to for the last 10, 15 minutes or so is the talk of the Claires, because we kind of went on to an offshoot of the Claire Gustance and the
uh-huh.
the, the sense
Yeah,
of smell,
yeah.
but we didn't really kind of do the overview of the more common clairs and how that might manifest. Because I think when people say clairvoyance and they say, oh, this means I see, people that are not in this world might think, oh, that's like, the sixth sense, that film where I see dead people, you know people might actually think that that's what we're talking about, where people see the physical manifestation of someone clear as day, as though I was looking at you. And whilst that can happen, um i I think the reality is quite different to that, right? So what can you tell us about clair clairvoyance and how you understand it?
Yeah, I mean, I do still meet mediums who are clairvoyant. And for me, it's just my personal experience. Those mediums who do actually see people,
Mm-hmm.
disembodied people, they've been that way from childhood,
Mm.
because there's this sort of magic age, isn't there,
So
where,
sorry, when you say disembodied, do you mean that they actually physically see somebody like they would see me?
yes, yes.
Okay.
And not only that, they will tell you that they see the spirit being even clearer than they see you.
Okay. So
And
like
that,
more glowing, more colourful kind of thing, or is that what?
yes, yes, yeah, they will actually say they are brighter. It's as if there's like a light behind them, you
Mm.
know, they're just clearer than you are to me when I see
Okay.
them. And so I always know when, and sometimes if you hear it from a child as well, you think, yeah, that's because how would a child know to say, well, they look clearer than you do? I can see them better than I can see you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so then there, but then clairvoyance can also be if you see somebody in your mind's eye. Am I right in saying that?
well, this again, you see, there's no. Now, somebody would say, I've heard people say they're clairvoyant, but they are seeing with the mind's eye.
Yeah, which
Now,
and then I think this is where the confusion comes in, because the mediums I've spoken to that I would consider to be living in the world of more modern mediumship have said to me that they have very, very rarely come across somebody that sees spirit physically as they
yes.
would see you
Yeah.
or I, and
Mhm.
that actually it's more they see somebody in their mind's eye. And so, do
Yeah.
you think that that's a difference in training now between mediumships that trained a lot of years ago versus mediums that are training now? Or do you think that it's changed for some other reason?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because you do hear a lot. You do hear a lot that um, the mediums aren't the same as they were in the past. Going back 50 years, there seemed to be more mediums who were clairvoyant in the sense that they would see
Yeah.
with their physical eyes, they would see spirit beings. Um, and there's part of me that doesn't want to accept that,
Mhm.
but my experience seems to back up that hypothesis. And I think it's probably because of a number of things, really. I think people don't have the time to
Mhm.
dedicate to it. Um, I think as well, going back in time, there may have been a stronger desire and a need when you think of, the First World War, particularly. After the First World War, how spiritualism expanded, um, and because people were desperate to have some proof that the people they'd lost, and sometimes you'd have whole families lost, if
Mm.
family where there were five or six boys, you might lose a whole family. So there was a traumatized society that
Yeah.
needed evidence, and it needed to be good evidence. And I
And
think there were
sorry, go
mediums
ahead.
around that tapped into that and developed
So
to that
then
level.
I'm assuming that it's the same then with the clairaudience, which is is it audient or audience? Clairaudience.
Clairaudient.
So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that that's the same where again, the discussions I've had has been, oh, hear, they will hear something, but it's like a memory of, if I'm thinking back to you saying something to me in my mind's eye or my mind's ear. I
Mm.
hear what your voice sounds like and I hear the words coming from you, but I'm not physically hearing it as though somebody physically sat in a chair next to me. Is it the same where you would say the mediums from the past, it would be a physical hearing versus a hearing of the mind's ear?
Yeah, again, I think a lot of mediums would, could hear and also see, um, as you're describing. But think about this then. You said a few minutes ago about it actually probably is more common for people to smell, to pick
Mm,
up a smell from someone who's passed over,
yeah.
or a taste. Now, would it be right to say that's true of clairaudient in that people often say they heard the voice being called,
Mm,
they heard their mother's voice, or they heard the father or somebody who's no longer with them, and they clearly heard their name being called. So maybe it's more common than we think, but
yeah.
it's something that maybe is not focused on so much in
Mm,
when people are describing what kind of clairaudient they are. Whether
yeah.
they hear outside of their ears, or is it more on an inner level.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and then I guess we spoke about claircognizance of being just a knowing, which I guess you could say is like that more than a gut feeling, more than an instinct, because it tends to be a little bit more specific than that, right? It's not just an instinct or a feeling of a situation. It's like it can be specific information that
Yeah,
you get, like
yeah,
I know that you have a silver car or something like that. It's
yeah,
just an innate knowing.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think again we don't have much time left, so I know can't really go into this too deeply. But it just talking about people who have lost people, smelling things, or like you say, hearing their name called out, and it usually is just like a short blast of something, isn't it? It's a name. You very rarely would hear full sentences or paragraphs or something like that. It
mhm,
tends to be
mhm,
something short. And it just made me wonder about whether, the exchange of abilities and the exchange of energy. And it's starting to make me wonder, is that Claire audience and the Claire aliens or whatever it was called for the smelling? is that becoming something that normal everyday Joes are experiencing more so than ever now? Because
Yes.
it's almost like spirit are getting rid of the middleman and saying, hey, I can communicate with you in these two very strong ways. You know,
Yes.
I can have a scent or a noise,
Mm.
and that spirit communicating with that person directly.
Which nicely takes us back to the beginning, doesn't it? About everyone is a medium. We have to be.
Yeah,
Everyone has those abilities, to varying degrees. It's not
yeah,
magic because
yeah. Go on, sorry.
what are we? We're all spirit, with bodies that would be floating out in the ether if it wasn't for gravity holding us down. We're all
Yeah.
spirit. What's your favourite saying? Something about um, I am spirit having a
Oh,
body
yeah.
that's.
A human experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But so if we're all spirit, we all are connected. This is
Yeah, and
why.
that's interesting because you, you think of the number of people that you've met in life and spoken to who are not mediums, but have a story of some connection of somebody
Uh
that's
huh.
passed. Or, like I said earlier, so and so passed, and then every day I could smell cigarette
Mm.
smoke or this, that, and the other. So it's like, yeah, are we all mediums? Just different levels of intentionality or,
Yeah,
intention within that, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I would say the only difference is that we're all mediums, but some people choose to be practicing mediums.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, to different degrees. Some people choose for it to be their whole life.
Hmm.
It's about working with the spirit world.
Okay, then. So then this leads to, I guess, that the last question of this episode. It- but and this could be a very, very big conversation because it's something we've spoken about at length. But in a nutshell, if we're talking about information that we can pick up being past, present, future from people's auras, from
Mm-hmm.
Akashic fields, etc., etc., what what is the purpose then of communicating with spirit if we can get all of that past, present, and future information from somebody's auric field and Akashic field?
Phew. For a minute, then I thought you were going to say, "What is the meaning of life?" I'm going to say
No,
that's a
no,
full
no.
podcast.
So what,
Yeah. So, what is the meaning of
like I said,
communicating? Yeah.
this is a huge subject, but if we can try and summarize it,
Mm.
what is what need do we have now then, other than proof of life or somebody hearing from somebody that's recently passed and maybe to help with their grieving process?
Yeah.
Is that really the only use now, or would you argue that we still get communication from spirit that we can't get from ourselves?
Yeah, I think we do. I think, but we have to be very, very discerning as mediums, and we have to recognise that quite often what we think we're getting from spirit, we may not be getting, from the spirit world. We may not be
Yeah,
getting it from them. But I think it's important to be able to continue striving to communicate with spirit because um, and also if you believe in the idea of reincarnation, I think it's important that you realise that there is more to this one life,
mm,
and for me that's really important for a lot of people who are struggling. This life for
mm,
them is not great, and for them to have to travel that life thinking this is it, there is nothing after this.
yeah.
you know. Um, I think it would be very difficult to continue to live a life of some degree of quality. So I think, yes, proof of existence beyond
Okay. Yeah,
this
that's
world.
interesting then. So you're saying it's kind of Um, Maybe not so much the information that they're getting from a particular person. It can just be proof that, oh, hey ho, your existence right now might be pretty tough and pretty crappy, and
Yeah,
you've got your challenges that you're working through in this life, but this isn't your lot. You
that's it.
know, look
Yeah,
at the potential of what could be in the future, and yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting.
It gives hope, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think you also kind of briefly touched upon something that I think we'll get into in greater detail further down the line as well, because you'd spoken about it, information and knowing whether that information is coming from spirit. And I think the way that you worded it, you were speaking on a very surface level, as in, am I actually getting this from spirit, or am I just, picking it up from the
yeah,
ether or from the
yeah.
aura? But then that also leads into other aspects, doesn't it? Of, am I communicating with the right entities? Am I communicating with the right energy? I just kind of wanted to clarify that, because that is something we'll be talking about further down the line as well, of having discernment for who you are actually speaking with, if you choose to, try and
Yeah.
open up those
Oh,
channels of communication. So that will be a future topic, right?
yes. But okay, let us just finish on one thing then,
Yeah.
because, I don't want people going away thinking, well, so it sounds like they may be saying that there's no spirit world and, there's no reincarnation, and absolutely not. I firmly believe in the spirit world and
Yeah.
reincarnation. And
Oh,
when
yeah,
it
yeah.
comes to when it comes to seeing spirits for yourself, one of the best ways of seeing spirit, because most of us don't see them on a clairvoyant level, but
Hmm.
we can see spirit in orb form. So you can
Mm.
take a photograph of yourself in a room, and in the dark, and see how many orbs come up in the background, because that's how we often see spirit. That's how they often are around us until we start to connect with them. Then they go into their more physical form
Yeah.
of who they were. But otherwise, they'll float around like little orbs
Yeah.
of energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I would like also clarify, for me, I am a strong believer in reincarnation and spirit. I think we're just in very interesting times now, aren't we, where the world's changing, and the way that we communicate, or the reasons for communicating with spirit, are maybe now very different to how they used to be in the
hmm,
past. And I think as we get a greater understanding, I I've said it before and I'll say it many times again. I'm a big believer in quantum physics, and the quantum world being the very strong link that we've been missing between spirituality and science. And so I think there has been moves over the past few years where people are able to start to get a more scientific understanding and a scientific explanation
yeah,
as to everything that we're talking about today. Um, but again, that'll be something that we go off and lay out a blueprint for to discuss on another day.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but no, I think it's been an interesting conversation today. Kind of, as I said at the beginning, for me, the empath was the first step into this world, this huge world of energy. But I think it's important for people to understand there's, what we're talking about when we talk about psychic versus mediumship. And then, of course, the introduction to the different clairs. Um, and so,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I guess, we'll see where the next episode takes us. But I think we've introduced some subjects today that would be a
yeah.
natural progression for that.
I hope that we've got the message across that, spirit aside, the spirit world, if you like, aside, the spirit within us, each and every one of us, is connected in such a way that we as human beings are so powerful.
Mm.
And we're far more than our usual five senses, much, much more.
Mm. Yeah.
So we need to understand that just standing alone as a human race, we are powerful. Then add the spirit world that's behind us, supporting us at every step. We're invincible.
Mm.
You know,
Well,
makes us invincible.
yeah, I think that's a pretty powerful place to end this episode.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, thank you as always for the interesting discussion. With there's going to be plenty more to come.
Yeah. And
Um,
thank you.
yeah, and as always, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for listening to The Veil and the Thread. Um, Take care of your energy, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode.